Morning, everyone.
Morning.
You know, it just occurred to me that when you go and see Star Wars, you realise that you had a Catholic upbringing when Luke Skywalker says, "May the Force be with you," and you immediately want to reply, "and also with you." Which is only polite, I suppose. So I wanted to ask you a question. Do you ever have the nagging feeling that you could be so much more than you've settled for? Do you ever feel that you could be and were meant to be more successful, more fulfilled, 10 times happier than you are today? And not only do you want those things, you'd be willing to work hard to get those things. It's just that you don't have any good ideas. And when you do finally get a good idea, nothing ever seems to come of it. This morning I want to show you how you might be sabotaging your own life with too busy being busy. This is the phrase I want you to leave here with this morning. Too busy being busy. And I want you to think about this phrase as you consider the why not questions of your life. Why are you not happier? Why are you not following your dreams? Why are you not doing the things that you want to do? Things that would make your life so much better. Could it be that you are too busy being busy? In the 4th chapter of the Gospel according to St. Mark, the writer tells us that Jesus was teaching and a crowd gathered around them that was so large that he got into a boat and sat out on the water's edge while the people were on the shore. Now, what's interesting about this crowd is that, like any crowd, it is laden with potential. Every single person who got out of their bed that morning did so for the same reason. They'd heard about Jesus, they were quite excited by what they'd heard, and they wanted to hear some of it for themselves because they'd assumed that what Jesus was saying could change their lives for the better, and who isn't interested in that? And so in the sandy amphitheatre by the water's edge, listening to Jesus, are some very excited people wanting to get some kind of an idea that will take their life through to the next level. And then Mark tells us that Jesus taught them many things, but by parables. Now, a parable is an ancient method of communicating a deep truth, a big idea. And so the people who used the parable method of communication tended to be people whose job it was to communicate big ideas and deep truths. It works like this. So here on this side of the diagram you have, I think you should all pause to consider the brilliance of the diagram. Yeah.
It'll be awesome when it's finished.
We do nothing perfectly here. So on this side of the diagram you have the big idea, you have the deep truth. And then alongside of that, the word parable means alongside, you have a simple, easy to understand story that communicates the meaning of the big idea, the deep truth. And as far as I know, there was nobody in the ancient world that used the parable method of communication more than Jesus, because no one was trying to communicate truths quite as deep as Jesus was. And I don't mean that to make Christianity sound arrogant, of course. It's just that Jesus was trying to teach people about God. And God, as you've probably noticed by now, is kind of mysterious and kind of invisible and awfully hard to get to know. And so when Jesus spoke to people about God, really deep truth, he often told these simple, folksy parables to get his point across. So, the big idea, the deep truth that Jesus is trying to communicate in this morning's episode has to do with why some people get the idea and other people don't. Why Jesus can speak the same words to the same group of people, and some people can hear those words, understand them, run with them to a broader, better, more fulfilled life, and other people can stay exactly where they are. That's the deep truth. And then the simple story that Jesus uses to communicate this deep truth is one that would have been instantly accessible to his first century audience. Jesus lived in a farmer's world. And so everyone was either a farmer or they knew somebody who was a farmer. So this story that Jesus goes on to tell about a guy sowing seed is one that everyone would have instantly found accessible. So the parable begins in verse 3 with the word listen. And Mark writes the word listen in an imperative way. So Jesus is saying here, guys, let's get this straight before we begin. I'm about to tell you a story about a farmer and about seed. But this isn't about a farmer and it's not about seed. It's about something else, something deep. And to get what that something is, you have to prick up your ears and pay attention. Get it? Then he goes on. A farmer went out to sow some seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path and the birds came up and ate it. Boo for the birds. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched and they withered because they had no root. Too bad. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants, so that they did not bear grain. So that's the story. And as farming stories from the ancient world go, I suppose this one is shockingly obvious. Everyone listening to Jesus on the water's edge that day would have understood that just because a farmer with the best of intentions went out and sowed some seed, that he would not have had predictable results. Everyone understood that farming was unpredictable by its very nature, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. And so this disappointing chain of events that Jesus tells here was very common. And the commonality of it is something that you, I think, can relate to in your own life. Not everything that you try works, does it? Just because you want to do a thing and you try to do that thing is no guarantee whatsoever of success. Sometimes things just don't work. There's a motivational thought for your fridge. In this universe, the one we actually live in, sometimes stuff doesn't work. And it's not fair. Some of the most difficult burdens we carry to church with us this morning are because stuff happened and we didn't deserve it. We tried our best. We gave it our best shot and it just didn't work. And it went wrong and it fell apart. Here we are. That's life in this world. Everyone understands that. However, in spite of the discouraging note, in spite of the painful journey thus far, the story does not end on a discouraging note. Verse 8. Jesus ends the story by saying, "Still other seed fell on good soil. It came up, grew, and produced a crop, multiplying 30, 60, or even 100 times." Now, at this point in the story, Jesus' audience would have been wide-eyed with jealousy. A normal crop yield in first century Palestine was about 700%. So you would sow a kilo of seed and you would get 7 kilos back. A bumper yield was 1,000%. So you would sow a kilo and get 10 kilos back. I'm suddenly aware that my math and percentages might be wrong. Please forgive me if they are. No, I don't understand math. I'm very insecure about it, actually. And so, because of that, I got a math tutor for my kids. Comes once a week, and sometimes I listen in to see what I'm paying for. And I don't have a clue what I'm hearing. To me, the whole conversation is a train leaves Toronto at 4 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon, travelling 60 kilometres an hour. How much is cheese? That's what it sounds like to me. Right? So cut me some slack on the math, all right? So Jesus speaks about this crop growing 30,000, 3,000, 6,000, 10,000%. His audience immediately understand that what we're now talking about is either extraordinarily good fortune or a miracle. We're talking about a situation where someone has had a go at something and it's been disappointing, and there's been struggles, and there's been a whole slew of episodes where it's been more down than up and it hasn't worked. But now suddenly there is enormous success. And so the story that Jesus tells does not end with disappointment or loss or pain. However much they were part of the journey, the story ends with success and happiness and a bumper yield. Good story. Then at the end of the story, in verse 9, Jesus says, "He who has ears, let him hear." In other words, I've just told you something. And it wasn't about a farmer, and it wasn't about seed either. It was about something else. Something important. Thank you and good night. And off he goes. The world's greatest communicator leaves his audience scratching their head, turning to one another by the lakeshore saying, I feel he was talking something important there. Did you understand it? I didn't have a clue. All I heard was cheese. Didn't get any of it. So later on that night, his closest friends go to him and they ask him a question. You know, like, Jesus, what did you say? What was the point? And I find that encouraging, by the way. The 12 apostles who have churches in Rome named after them, those guys didn't have a clue. And I find that encouraging because I, just like you, can be religiously dumb sometimes. I can read the Bible and read the very few words that Jesus spoke and still not get them. And still feel I have questions. So I like that they had to go to Jesus and say, Jesus, what was that? So Jesus gives them a two-part tutorial that explains the meaning of the deep parable. He says, on the one hand, the reason why some people get the idea and others don't, well, it's got something to do with God. However, on the other hand, the reason why some people get the idea and others don't, it's got something to do with people. So let's take the first of these then. Apparently, the reason why some people get it and others don't is God's fault. In verse 11, Jesus says to his closest followers, the secret of the kingdom of God has been given to you. However, to other people I speak in parables, then it gets weird. So that they may be ever seeing but never perceiving, and ever hearing but never understanding. Otherwise they might turn and be forgiven. So it seems like, I know, right? It seems like the teaching of Jesus is like the clues on a crossword, or like religious Sudoku. Some people get it, almost intuitively, and other people don't. Or it's like those pictures your therapist charges you $150 per half hour to look at. So I heard. Right, you know, they show you these pictures and they say, what do you see? And you're like, I don't know, chocolate? Apparently that's not the right answer. Right? So Jesus is saying here that this is what my parables are kind of like. They simultaneously conceal and reveal God. And whether or not you find them concealing or revealing has got nothing to do with how religiously smart you are, and everything to do with God. So when Mark writes, the secrets of the kingdom of God have been given to you, he writes the word given in what grammarians call the divine passive. He's saying here that the reason why some people get the idea and other people don't is not because of their innate religious ability or morality or anything like that. It's because God seems to reach into their soul, flick a switch, and they somehow get the forgiveness thing. They somehow get the importance of a new life and of redemption and all those big ideas. They don't understand them perfectly, and they don't follow them perfectly, but they kind of grasp it. They kind of get it. They have an aha moment, and it makes sense. And when the first Christians heard teaching like this, they didn't immediately break out into a discussion about whether or not this was fair of God. They immediately instead turned inward and said, wait a minute. in many respects, I have a kind of morally, religiously disappointing life. I have not done anything perfectly. I have skeletons in my closet. I have stories in my book that are not a Norman Rockwell painting at all. There's some dark stuff in here. And you're telling me that Jesus wants me and is interested in me and likes me. That's how the first Christians read this weird thing. So Jesus here is talking like a lawyer, right? He's saying, on the one hand, it's like this. The reason why some people get the idea is because on the one hand, it's a God thing. However, on the other hand, the reason why some people get the idea and others don't, it's a people thing. Then he goes on. He says, reverting back to parables, the farmer sows the word. Some people are like the seed along the path where the word is sown. As soon as they hear it, Satan comes and takes away the word that is sown in them. Others, like seed sown on rocky places, hear the word and at once receive it with joy. But since they have no root, they last only a short time. When trouble comes or persecution comes, because of the word, they fall away quickly. And still others, and read this next sentence, are like seed sown among thorns. They hear the word, but the worries of this life, the deceitfulness of wealth, and the desire for other things come in and choke the word, making it unfruitful. He just described every one of us. The worries of this life, the deceitfulness of wealth, desire for other things. So, there's a farmer who sows seed. And what does the farmer want every single seed that he sows to do? To grow. He's not selective. He doesn't have favourites among the seed. He wants them all to do well. He wants them all to grow. And Jesus now says in these verses that the seed represents people. So Jesus is saying in this parable, when God looks at every single one of our lives, here and throughout the world, he has nothing but the best of intentions. He wants good things to happen in every life. He wants growth everywhere, happiness everywhere, fulfillment everywhere. He wants everyone to do well. So here's the context then. Crowd of people on the lakeshore, listening to Jesus. The word of God is spoken. The intent of that word is to do something good in each life. And when that word is spoken, every single person in the crowd hears it. And what is revealing about what Mark writes here is that the word "hear" is written in what Bible geeks like me call the aorist tense. 3 times. People in verse 15, they hear the word, Satan takes it away. In verse 16, they hear the word and subsequently fall away because of difficulties. Verse 18, they hear the word and then the worries and the stresses and the ambitions of life choke it out. 3 hearings of the word are described by Mark using the aorist tense of the verb to hear. And in Greek, the aorist tense denotes a one-time deal that's not repeated. So they hear, and then they pay no particular attention. They hear, they give no particular focus. They hear, they don't really concentrate. They just hear, it goes in one ear, out the other, and nothing much ever happens. We have ideas like this all the time, don't we? When we do have ideas, and we all have them, ideas about how we can make our life better, they pop up in our head, but they don't stay. They're there, they go. We either don't remember them or we don't do anything about them, they're just here and they're gone. But then in verse 20, a different kind of hearing is implied. The aorist tense is suddenly replaced by the perfect tense, present tense, which describes a continual, I should say, ongoing hearing, as opposed to a one-time deal. So these people in verse 20, they hear, And then they focus, they pay attention, they concentrate. Look at what he says. Others, like seed sown on good soil, hear the word with focus, with attention, with concentration, and they accept it. And it produces a crop 30, 60, 100 times what was sown. Now, sowing seed. I've never done it. But it doesn't seem to be particularly difficult to me. Sowing seed to me would seem to be a very ordinary activity. And so too are most of the things that would make all our lives so much better. They're just ordinary. Thinking is ordinary. Having ideas is ordinary. Coming up with solutions is ordinary. There's no rocket science to any of the things that would make our lives so much better and more enjoyable. But when we busy our brains with nonsense, we make it impossible for ourselves to think clearly and find answers. You get that impression from these verses, don't you? There is a good word. And the good word wants to do a good thing, but it's crowded out. In a fast succession, there's Satan, there's worries, there's shallowness, there's silly ambitions, there's desires for other things, and it's all noise, 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 noise. And so this good word that's in the head, it can't do anything, it can't go anywhere, because there's too much noise competing against it. In 1995, a man called Adrien Begun, professor of thermodynamics at Duke University, travelled to Nancy in France to deliver a lecture when he unexpectedly had an insight that would change the way that scientists think about life. Prior to delivering his own talk, he attended a lecture by the Nobel laureate Ilya Prigogine, in which the famous academic made a statement that at that time the entire scientific world agreed with. He said this. I can't remember if I wrote it down or not. No, I didn't. I gave you pictures, that's better. Here's what he said. While many tree-like structures exist in nature, from lightning bolts to the air ducts in lungs, to river deltas to trees, although these and many, many other tree-like structures do resemble one another by design, they do so purely by chance. There is no unifying principle dictating either the abundance of tree-like structures in nature or their congruity in vastly different contexts. In other words, I don't know why these people can't speak English, but in other words, everywhere you look in nature, from the macro to the micro, there are tree-like shapes, tree-like structures. They're all over the place. And they look similar, but it's all just a coincidence. There's no design here, there's no purpose here, it's just a coincidence. And in 1995, when Adrien Begun, the professor of thermodynamics, heard the Nobel laureate make this statement, he intuitively knew it was absolutely incorrect. And so he left the lecture hall, got out a beer mat or whatever people write good ideas on, and he penned what physicists would later call the constructal law, which states this. For a finite flow to exist in time, its configuration must evolve in such a way that produces easier access to the currents that flow through it. I know, right? How awesome is that? Now, listen. This is just a fancy way of saying that in nature, from the macro to the micro, everywhere you look, there appears to be a design, a structure, a shape that gives an evolutionary advantage, an edge, an extra 10% to structures that allow for flow. It's all about flow. Let me say that again. There is in nature a design that gives an advantage, an edge, an extra 10% to structures that allow for flow. You see it everywhere, whether it's the flow of energy from the air to the ground in lightning, or the movement of water through a river delta, or nutrients from one end of a tree to another, or air through the air ducts of lungs. The structures that work best are tree-like. Guess what shapes the human brain is made up of? Tree-like things. That's not their scientific name. Human brain has 100 to 200 billion cells, apparently, and each cell has a tree-like structure. And the flow that these structures are, we as Christians would say, is designed to facilitate our ideas and thoughts and solutions. But the more we clog up our heads by not paying attention and by being deliberately distracted, the less ideas we have, the less solutions we find. Think of it like a log jam on a river. That's our head too often. Our brain is amazing. The answer is in between your ears. It's meant to have ideas, to find solutions, to come up with thoughts that will push your life forward and make things so much better and easier for you. What you need is up there. For sure it's up there. But between attending to irrelevant email chains and text messages from friends and looking at puppies on Snapchat, it's a permanent logjam up there. We either don't have ideas, or when we do have them, they slip. And they don't amount to anything because we're just too busy being busy. In a distracted world, and that's the one we all live in now. In a distracted world, we sabotage our own lives by busying ourselves with the trivial and ignoring the truly important. In a classic study of CEO behaviour that was done at Uppsala University, and this study was done in 1951, so no social media or texting in those days. It's a famous study. If you've done an MBA or anything, you'll have come across it. So they shadowed Sweden's leading industrialists. So a team of researchers hovered over them for a period of time with a clipboard and a stopwatch. And what they discovered was that not a single CEO in 1951 was able to concentrate for more than 20 minutes without being interrupted. Can you relate to that in your own life? Between attending meetings you don't need to attend, or reading emails you should never have been sent in the first place, or helping a colleague who just wants a minute of your time, most of your day gets eaten up with the agendas of other people. And then by the time you throw in Candy Crush and texting and Facebook and emails into the mix, we're sometimes lucky to cram in 2 hours of work into an actual 8-hour day. And the situation is even worse for our free time, which is supposed to be free. It's supposed to be refreshing, but it's not. It's too busy being busy. For example, we know that the average worker in North America checks their inbox, like physically looks to see if they've got an email, 32 times a day. What exactly are you waiting for in your inbox? Like if your parents went to check their mail 32 times a day, that would be considered weird. Right? But consider the mathematics, ignoring what I said earlier about math, of that weirdness. If you check your inbox 32 times a day, allowing a minute for checking your inbox and another minute for getting your focus back on track after you checked your inbox, that's 64 minutes a day, am I right? And that's just checking your inbox. That's 21 hours a month, and you still haven't actually replied to any of these emails. And while we're busy doing all of these low-value tasks, we're ignoring the important. We're not giving ourselves time to think and come up with ideas and solutions. Like if you just spent an hour a day thinking, about your life, about what you're doing or meant to be doing or want to be doing, just thinking, would that make your life richer or poorer? What solutions would you find? What ideas would you come up with? I think it's good to, it's now more than ever, to embrace the perks of being unavailable. But do you know what your inbox is? Do you know what your smartphone is? It's other people's agenda for your day. Do you know what your news feed is? It's a tool designed to stop you achieving your dreams so that other people can achieve theirs. Just this week, Mike Allen, the founding president of Facebook, he actually admitted this, that Facebook is designed to consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. And then he actually said, every now and again, we need to give our users a hit of dopamine. It's the brain's happy drug, to keep them coming back. Our drug dealer of choice is making millions and millions of dollars every day by consciously stealing your time and attention, stopping you do what will make your life better so that their lives can be better. Do you have as good a life as the founding president of Facebook? The Bible advises Christians, listen carefully because this is a really useful Christian thought. The Bible advises Christians to take every thought captive and to make it obedient to Christ. And you've known me long enough to know that I don't put myself up as a model to follow, sadly. But I would recommend to you the practice of meditation. Most mornings I like to start the day with nothing. I like to sit down before the kids get up, before the chaos takes over, and with my hands on my lap and my eyes closed, I like to focus on a single thought. That thought will vary from day to day. Sometimes it'll be a Bible verse, sometimes it'll be a Christian idea, sometimes it'll be a short prayer, but in a Christian frame of mind, I like to start my day by concentrating on just one thing. And it takes practice, because try it when you go home. Sit down and try thinking about one thing. Notice what happens to your mind. All sorts of other thoughts will come rushing into your head. And the Christian practice is to take those captive and make them obedient to Christ and concentrate and focus. I like to think we win the day by winning the morning. I mean, if you start off your day by checking your Facebook news feed before you get out of bed, you're just training yourself to be distracted. And unless you're like an advisor to Donald Trump, you probably don't need to see what happened in the world overnight before you go out of bed either. And unless you're trading overnight in the Hang Seng, you probably don't need to check what the stock market did in Asia overnight. Maybe you do, I don't know, I don't live in that world, but maybe you can wait half an hour. So start the day right. Try this week. 15 minutes. Before anything else happens, sit down. Shut up. Close your eyes. Breathe. And concentrate on something Christian. Just one thing. Just this morning, probably too much information. Maybe not put this on the tape in case my mum gets worried. Edit that bit out as well. So I woke up earlier than I would have liked this morning. I don't know, 4 o'clock or something. And as you sometimes do when you wake up early, you worry. Anyone? Am I on my own here? No. Okay. The person you came with is like that too. So I woke up earlier than I would like this morning, and for some reason I started to worry. And if you think hard enough, you can always find something to worry about. So I got up and I did my meditation thing. And fortunately for that issue, there's lots of material. So I sat down on my sofa, hands on my lap, eyes closed, breathing deeply, focusing on the words of Christ. Do not be afraid. Over and over again. Thought would come into my head. No, do not be afraid. Thought would come into my head. No, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Finish my meditation, get breakfast for the kids. I'm not afraid. Might be afraid again tonight. Then tomorrow's a new day. Do you understand that concept? Try it. Give yourself space. Give your head space to work. And make it Christian. Any questions on any of that? If we have. Do you know, I'm so glad that you made that point, because it deals perfectly with what Jesus actually said this morning. Jesus this morning, in the text I should say, said it really is like both sides of the coin thing, isn't it? So on the one hand, God's doing his thing. God is doing his thing. But on the other hand, on the other side of the coin, we have to do our thing. And they both have to work. So in the case, like in the example I gave from what happened in my own life this morning, I would say that yes, I chose to get out of bed and not worry. I chose to get out of bed and meditate. I chose to get out of bed and be deliberately Christian in my thought life. That was something I did. I did that. But there's another side of the coin, isn't there? And the other side of the coin is God is doing his thing. God is working while I'm working. I'm working while God is working. So, I think the thrust of the New Testament would say, God is going to do his thing in our life. God wants to do his thing in our lives. God is so for us, so powerful to do, what is the Bible Testament, more than we can ask, think, or imagine. But does that excuse us from doing our part? We as Christians would say no, it doesn't. But as we make our imperfect efforts, which is as good as they can be, we make those efforts as Christians kind of confidently, knowing that God is with us. And God is going to work. And God is going to help. I knew this morning that when I got up to meditate on Do Not Be Afraid, I knew what the end result was going to be. Partly because I'd done it before, and partly because I believe God is there. And God is kind. And God does his work. Does that answer your question? Yes. So, but there would be, yes, is there any point to praying without the Holy Spirit? We would say no, right? If God isn't active in our lives to help, to work, then our Christian efforts are just a waste of time, right? So yes, I agree with you. But just because we believe all these wonderful things about God being active in our lives, that of course doesn't absolve us of doing our thing. In the old days, they used to talk about God's work and our responsibility. So God does his part, but he doesn't absolve us of the responsibility to do ours. And they both go hand in hand. And we got that really strongly from what Jesus said this morning. Some people don't understand the word because it's a God thing. But some people don't understand the word because it's a people thing. Conversely, some people do understand the word because it's a God thing. Some people don't because it's a people thing. Both go hand in hand. Excellent point. I'm glad you raised it. Thank you for coming. God bless you. See you next time.